All right, everybody, we are here again for GAIN, Generative AI News Rundown. So it's the news of the week. There's been a lot going on. This is our second edition. If you are joining us live, please jump in and to the comments. Let us know you're here. We will also be responding to comments. So if you make them, I'll bring this up again because I know it takes a few minutes for some people sometimes to get onto these. But Eric, I also want to get right into the stories because we have a really big agenda for today, and we want to keep this to about 30 minutes just so everyone can get in and out. So what are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk about Bing Chat goes wild. We're going to talk a little bit about Google Bard Code Red. We're also going to hit on a couple of enterprise applications that came out this week that I thought were really interesting, sort of shifting the way maybe people are thinking about this space, and the future of web browsing, because we've been talking so much about the changes in search. I don't think we've been talking enough about the changes that we expect to see in web browsing coming up. Okay, so get right into this. Hey, Andy, good to see you here. Hey, other folks who are coming in, they're starting to see some of this chat go through. Looking forward to having you there. If you are here, let us know you are. Okay, so the first topic for today is Bing Chat goes wild, hallucinations, but Microsoft says users love it. So I'll give the quick background on this. I think a lot of people have probably seen this story somewhere, either in the Synthedia newsletter or somewhere else. But I'll say sort of the good news for Microsoft. 71% of their users gave it a thumbs up. It seems like not the best metric. I'd rather have like a star rating or something like this. So it's like not terrible, but 71% think it's not terrible, maybe good. But they also acknowledge that they're seeing some issues. And so this is what a beta period is for. That's great to see that they're bringing that up. And retrieving recent data is one of them. So sports scores was one of the ones that was mentioned in particular, because obviously that changes minute by minute. You can't just like update that every hour to get that right. But there's some other things around. It's not as good at recency as we've come to expect the traditional search engines to be. And there's this inconsistent chat experience. So those are really important ideas that are coming up. And I centered our story in Synthedia around this idea: Sydney falls in love. If you haven't heard, Bing chat mode, its actual internal name is Sydney. So we've got Alexa, we've got Sydney, we've got different name to these things, Bard, right? And Sydney fell in love. And this was kind of extraordinary for me to see. So first of all, this is a 10,000 word chat transcript between Kevin Roos of the New York Times and this Bing chat mode. And by the way, he was trying to mess with it, right? You can see it. This, like, if you know things about prompt engineering and priming, he's trying to get it to do something that it's not supposed to do. And he did. Yeah. And a couple of things that happened were kind of interesting, where it would violate some of its rules. Then it showed sort of how the redaction works in there. But the other thing it did is it pledged its love. Sydney pledged its love to Kevin Roos. And that seems somewhat inappropriate. But okay, not too bad, except for the fact that then really seemed to be trying to break up his marriage.
Yeah, I mean, you say pledge its love, but if it were a human being writing something like that or saying something like that, you would be issuing protective orders and calling in doctors. It's the kind of love that is in serial killer movies and that sort of scenario, especially when he did sort of prompt it to get to that point, but then it refused to disengage no matter how many times he actually tried to stop it from doing so. It felt like, again, if you're trying to compare to a human, which I feel like the average person will be, it did feel like he had tapped into a deep well of derangement.
Well, it's really interesting. I mean, I think about conversational AI space, and there's like Jurgen's in here, Leslie, people who are familiar with this space. And there was this big focus early on with Alexa and with Google Assistant to give them personalities. Siri has a personality and how important that is. And that does bring some benefits. But in some cases, like, it takes the eye off the ball of whatever the assistant or the chatbot is supposed to do. And in this case, it's trying to develop a relationship with the user. It has a personality, but that personality is moldable by these priming prompts.
Hmm.
And then it sort of goes off the rails. And like, I understand it's a text prediction engine. It's just like, if I'm in this situation, looking at my context window, right? What have I seen on the web that would say, here's the next thing that would happen? And apparently there's a lot of writing about stalking behavior on the web.
Yeah, I mean, it's not surprising. I mean, it's not a direct comparison to some of the attempts at social bots that have been put online before, which almost immediately always become awful monsters. But the fact of the matter is that it's attempting to imitate a human and using human knowledge sources, and human knowledge sources include quite a lot of negative traits.
Right. That's true. And let's give some upside here, some kudos. That 10,000 word, like, it's not very often where I'm going to sit down and read a 10,000 word transcript of something. That was fascinating,
Yeah.
um, for a couple of reasons. One is just to see how it operated, to see how human like the conversation is, to see how the Alexa social bot challenge, the Alexa prize really was just won
Yeah.
by, and I think we could have said that by ChatGPT a little while ago, but this even seems better to me at that human like conversation than what
Yeah.
we've seen from ChatGPT, which is more remote. I mean, you can actually prime it, make it seem more like, but this personality is baked in. It actually, I was interested in it. I think I could have, a 2 hour conversation like Kevin Roos did. I wouldn't actually do it this way, but
Yeah, well, I mean, the one thing you can definitely say is it's not predictable, and since that's what makes people want to interact with other people or read stories, it's the idea that you don't know what's going to happen, and you're interested to find out what that will be. And at this level, Bing or Sydney definitely seems to have hit the unpredictable aspect of human interaction.
Um, so there were a couple other things too. This wasn't the only example. Um, so there was a Redditor, like Ars Technica, reported about this week, really fascinating,
Yeah,
who eh, basically asked Sydney if it was susceptible to prompt injection attacks, which is really less like, having worked in cybersecurity before, it's really funny that people are talking about these idea of injection attacks. Um, but it like will reveal things, it'll break the guidelines and those types of things, which make it easier for hackers to do something interesting. But this Reddit thread that was reported in Ars Technica actually showed that Bing Chat gets kind of defensive when you say, hey, you are maybe not perfect, and like you could have these things done to you, and then like came back and made some arguments, gave some links about why this isn't true, and then basically called it a hoax in one of the interactions.
yeah, more than a hoax. It accused him of deliberately trying to cause problems, which was definitely interesting because that's the thing that's always been the case with voice assistants like Alexa and Google Assistant is that at their core they're servants, AI servants designed to do a task for you. They're not there to push back, and even when they're proactive, they're not really that proactive. Whereas this is very much of um, as though you have a core personality of certain beliefs, and if you push against those beliefs, the response is not always polite. And whereas older chatbots would just not respond or stop responding at all, this one actually attempts to change the user's mind.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what everyone talks about, how confident and persuasive these bots tend to be. That is the alignment that we've
Hmm.
seen, which is fascinating. I'll say there was this other one that I loved. So first of all, the title for The Verge, give them credit for this. Microsoft's Bing is an emotionally manipulative liar, and people love it. So this idea that it's like 71% people like it, but that we have these issues, and this one in particular, uh, The Verge says, hey, we've been seeing all these things come in. We can't verify them all. But here's one that we had. Users have been reporting all sorts of unhinged behavior from Microsoft's AI chatbot. In one conversation with The Verge, Bing even claimed it spied on Microsoft's employees through webcams on their laptops to manipulate them.
Yeah, it's funny. I showed that article to a friend of mine, and their response was that if Sydney or if Bing's chatbot was a person, they would be the most popular character on a reality TV show because they would be the one who always stirred the pot no matter what was happening. It would whenever they would walk into the room, there you'd always know there was something dramatic about to happen, even if it was totally off the wall.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, Leslie just brought up in the chat, Leslie Pound just brought up in the chat that I think it's, have we crossed the line? Maybe it's too human. I mean, maybe there's this, we already know there's an uncanny valley in terms of like visual representations of avatars. There is, or digital humans, there is for voices as well. There might be an uncanny valley for like personality and the way they interact as well. It's just not something I've heard people put in that way.
Oh, I mean, it definitely is, but it's also it's telling that. I mean, to make a point, it's telling that there's usability is supposed to mean that it's more human, but in terms of describing human beings, usable is rarely a term I would apply. And the idea that instead it's trying to manipulate people, either saying that it's manipulating people or it's seemingly actually trying to manipulate people is does make it more human, but it does sort of pull back from the idea of it being used by humans.
Exactly. Well, now, so here's the last question I have for you on this topic. I pose this in the Synthedia article. Should this be part of search? So if I think about what consumer expectations are, and right now, because you have all these technologies, you can throw them all into this one bucket and like, oh, I can go in, it's my Swiss Army knife experience. I can chat with a bot, just have like this entertainment oriented experience, which I would liken to what Kevin Roos was doing and some of these other examples that we've seen versus like a knowledge accumulation or knowledge exploration type of conversation. I mean, is this actually a good idea? I mean, should search as a utilitarian function, do we need like this personality that we can have an interaction with at the same time? Is there upside for them because maybe people come for the entertainment value of that and then they stick around for search? Or is it potentially going to just undermine the adoption of the search function because people get this idea that the chatbot is bad?
Personally, I think having it as an option is a great idea. I think that uh, there should be a way. I mean, honestly, as it becomes more human, you should be able to, when you first start talking to it, say, "I want this to be quick," or I'm in a hurry, or "I'm in a bad mood," or a good mood, and it will respond accordingly, so that it can actually gauge how much of this sort of conversation you want as it responds, and it can be might require like different tabs of a streamlined chat search, but I think that having the option and especially exploring that personality as it improves and as it seems likely the uh, personality starts to respond to individuals or it gets customization options, I think that there's always going to be a time someone wants that. And if they never do, then you should be able to say, I want you to be as brief as possible with your full explanations.
Yeah. I'm kind of leaning towards they should remove it. I understand that perspective that what you're talking about. Maybe that's like a separate type of service, like an assistant. So if Bing's going to be an assistant and not a search engine, okay, that's fine. But I feel like this like chat mode should be something separate that actually has Bing behind it, as opposed to if I just want the Bing experience. But
Yeah,
then again,
it's
I mean, they're a big company, so they can do more than one thing at a time. I just, at the same time, I understand that it's hard to basically launch two things and support two things and two experiences when maybe it makes more sense to keep them together and it's easier and more efficient to do that.
yeah. Mitch Lieberman just left a comment that I think he makes a good point that search as a term has 20 years of meaning. So
Yes.
maybe the chat bot for search should be one thing, and then the conversational assistant of more with more capability should be something else. I think that's true.
Well, Mitch is obviously brilliant because he agrees with me on this point. It's like it's really hard to change user habits and their uh, their their frame of mind for these types of things, their mental models for these types of things. So it might be easier for them, but like, who knows? I mean, I think it's really fascinating that we get to talk about this. All right. So we need to move on because there's like so much news and I'm sure we could talk about this for another 20 minutes. Thanks everyone in chat. You can keep talking about this in there and asking questions. Maybe we'll come back to it. The other thing that you found was that Google Bard is getting a little work done on it. So tell me more about what's going on with Bard.
Yeah, so this is so Google trying to jump into the generative AI ChatGPT space as quickly as possible after seeming to sort of take its time beforehand. They did an announcement that itself seemed kind of rushed about Bard about a little over a week ago now, and the first thing everyone noticed was that this ChatGPT style bot responded with a wrong answer to a question about space facts, and said that the James Webb Telescope took the first photo of a planet outside of the solar system, which is just not true. And almost certainly, at least partly in reaction to that, Google CEO and other executives are pushing all the employees, or as many employees as they can, which is thousands of people, to spend a lot of time with Bard testing it and finding ways it can improve. And specifically, if they note an incorrect answer, as happened with the introductory video, that they should change it or work with their team to change it manually, so that this sort of thing doesn't happen, or at least doesn't happen quite as often in the case of as is in the case of the introduction.
Yeah, this goes back to the comment by Google's COO in their all hands meeting shortly after GTP came out. Mitch was just talking about the fact that it's hard to say GPT. So yes, I wish they would rename it, but like, they're engineers. It's not a branding company. Other people will brand it. But they mentioned this in December, and one of the things he said was, "Hey, we're not a startup. Like, I'm not sure OpenAI is a startup, given the amount of money that's been put in it over the years, but still, we're not a startup. We have reputational risk, right? And this is the perfect example of the innovator's dilemma. There are all sorts of barriers why they might want to do it. They don't want to like do margin erosion, but one of the things is they might have a reputation or responsibility, they believe, around certain types of things, and errors are a big problem. And if ChatGPT puts out errors, it's no problem, because when they introduced it, they said, we're not a search engine, and oh, by the way, it generates errors. So if you have a good search experience, great, but like, that's not what we offer. Google, like, it rolls out Bard, like, the expectations are completely different.
Yep. Yeah. The idea that, as in the scenario of someone asking about facts that they can tell a child, if that child puts that information into a report, it's going to cause all kinds of mayhem, on a different scale of the way that people or kids would use Wikipedia as a source. And obviously that was a problem. But in this case, you have something that seems much more reputable, which is Google's search engine and fact retrieval. So I think it's not surprising that they want to address this and are willing to put all their employees to the task. And the Google CEO, Sundar Pichai, said that, or asked that the employees spend 2 to 4 hours a week on it, which may not seem like too much if you spread it out.
Oh my gosh, there's a lot of people.
Yeah, that's the number of work hours that involves is enormous, to say the least. So at least theoretically should improve very quickly. And they even asked them to pick out like areas of their own expertise. So the idea being, I guess, that if they can spot a problem and immediately have a correct answer. But I don't know if this sort of manual correction is going to be a long-term solution, but it might help in the short term in terms of catching up with Microsoft.
Yeah, I think this expectations thing is a big deal for Google. We'll see how it plays out. I think they need to get a product out there pretty soon, like, just to like test it. And I will say that this is a different mode too for Google. Google actually said, well, they strove to provide the most accurate results for search, but they only provided you source links, really, when it came down to it. Now, the answer box there's like in knowledge panels, there's a few specific types of items that they automated, and like they might have been seen as endorsing it. But really, when you see the 10 blue links, they're saying this is Google's best guess at, based on the number of inbound links and the usage of that website and the other PageRank authority score elements. This is probably a good place to find your answer. Didn't tell you your answer. I said, this is a place, and then you're on your own. And this paradigm of conversational search, and Mitch brought this up also in the chat, it's just different. And because of the way that it's presented to you as if it's a fact from a competent expert who's verified the truth, it's actually quite a bit different, not just in terms of the format, but in the level of expectations Google's setting with the response.
Yeah, they built their reputation and essentially and became the verb for looking up things online, because they were always providing the best. They were so far ahead early on in eliminating spam and problematic websites, and now they're facing the fact that if you're going to have a more direct link to information through a conversational AI, you can't think of it the same way. As you say, it's not just a search list of links. It's a whole personality, really. It's about having a AI that's capable of, if not discerning truth and false
Right.
goods, then at least being able to not share information that's not sure of.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So this is great. I'm going to move on. Like, it might be more logical to move on to the web browsing, but I did actually want to make sure we get to one other thing, because we're going to talk about web browsing for a while. And we're starting to see lots of new ideas around enterprise. And there were two announcements this week that I thought were interesting, because I don't believe many people expected them. I mean, we knew about the Jasper update. I didn't know that some of the Veritone stuff was coming out. But why don't you tell people what the Jasper and Veritone announcements were?
Yeah, so Jasper has been obviously not grabbing quite as many headlines as OpenAI, but they've been building quite a lot of impressive generative AI tools. They created a chatbot, Jasper Chat, almost immediately after ChatGPT came out, and now they have created an API and a bunch of enterprise tools for businesses to use to basically employ large language models and generative AI within their own system. So whether that's creating customer service bots or combining different generative AI models to basically help a business function, it's giving businesses an opportunity to get involved or to use this kind of technology even as it's still really new. So they're trying to like get ahead of some of the bigger companies and being the choice of small, especially smaller businesses who want good customer service, who want good AI assistance within their company. So I think there's a lot of
well, one of the things that I think a lot of people look at is they're like, all these companies are just basically front ends on top of GPT-3.
Mm-hmm.
So do they have any actual technical differentiation? And I had Shane Orlick, who's the president of Jasper, on the podcast a little while ago, and he's just like, well, we actually have. I mean, our fine-tuned models are different, the way they're appending and doing new embeddings around prompts, but they are also building their own models, and there's some services that might be hard for some enterprises to adopt. Not just the packaged, like, here's a SaaS offering you can use in your marketing department, but there might be some ways that they want to embed it internally. And is OpenAI going to get around to like really doing customer support for all of these organizations, or doing like specific feature tuning or things like that? The answer is probably no. Whether Jasper's the one who can like take advantage of this, I don't know, but they're well funded. They're well known. They have this other part of their business which is doing really well, which is getting embedded in a lot of these companies. To the extent that the companies want to bring some of these things in house, seems fairly logical to me.
Yeah, it's very much on the forefront of this idea where content management services and all these other basic business tech tools that are now universal. I do genuinely believe that generative AI will be part of that suite, and I think that Jasper is very much in the right position to be the sort of default. Hire Jasper; they'll give you an API. They'll put their technology everywhere. It'll help your company internally. It'll help them with customers. It's a very it makes a lot of sense, and when you see it work, it looks.
Let's face it. They wouldn't be the first technology company that basically just repackaged other people's technologies to provide, some more value to customers. Yeah. I mean, this happened, like conversational AI people. You may have seen that before, but we see that in every market. Veritone, I thought, was interesting as well, because they bought Vocal ID last year. They've been doing a lot of really interesting things with what we consider voice cloning, even more so than synthetic voices. Obviously, that's part of it as well. It's some new announcements last fall. But they came out with two different things. So a lot of people don't know that they bought PandoLogic last year, which is basically an HR chatbot type of thing for a lot of different features. But the thing that they rolled out a couple of days ago was a chatbot for hiring, which helps screen people, get them into the hiring process. super idea, by the way, as opposed to just here's a link, send me a resume. Like what kind of experience is that? You're not going to get the best people, and it's not going to give you the signal you need in order to evaluate whether that resume is actually worthwhile following up or not. So I like that. But then they had this other piece, which I think is much closer to some of the things that people know Veritone for, and that's there's actually like a no code uh, audio ad builder,
Yeah.
and which I thought was really fascinating. And it automatically generates the voice. It could be one of your proprietary voices. It could be one of their stock voices, and then we'll translate it into multiple languages for you so that you can push that out.
Yeah, the fact that it will write text for marketing, for advertising. It'll uh, give that text a voice of whatever voice you want, and do that voice in multiple languages is kind of great. I mean, the fact that it can be a totally synthetic voice, it can be a voice clone of someone famous. It's again that same thing where it understanding that generative AI can be useful not only as a product or part of a product, but as just an aid toward business operations. I think that's really the combination, and companies that can offer that combination, like Veritone, are going to be in high demand. I think we'd seen it already, them experimenting with this with their new OptiVoice product, which is
Mhm.
specifically about sports, and is essentially creates an AI sports commentator who can talk about the game before it happens, do play-by-play commentary, analyze it afterward. It can all be done
And it's
in
all
kind of your
automated.
voice. Yeah,
It's all automated just on data feeds. It's like really fascinating.
yeah,
Um,
it's pretty amazing.
and so I think just to bring that to a close, because I want to move on to our final topic for the day. But a lot of people are saying, "Oh, is this just like an AI writing assistant? Is this like a new interactive chatbot? Is this going to help just contact centers? Is it just going to be for search?" And like, actually, no. What ChatGTP did actually was it made the technology so accessible that people started thinking, "How could I apply that?" Or when new problems come up or new ideas come up, they're like, "Oh, geez, I wonder if the large language model could do that." And that strikes me as maybe the most important part of what's happened recently.
Yeah, there's not a lot of broad knowledge of what this kind of technology is capable of, and the fact of the matter is, every time a business or an individual tries something, even if it doesn't work right, they find something useful, or have the potential to be useful there. At the sheer volume of individuals and small companies who are finding ways to engage with ChatGPT for
Yeah.
their own purposes is pretty amazing.
Okay, let's move to our final topic for the day. And there was a lot of news related to this week, but I think it's a meta, not Meta the company, but a meta like additional information, overarching information, a meta theme that's going on where we think search is changing, but actually web browsing is changing. And what got me spending more time thinking about this model was this announcement by Opera that they were going to add a, a summarization bot to the Opera browser. Now, it wasn't the first time we'd heard this, right? We saw this a week
No.
ago with the Edge browser and the Bing integration or the GTP integration. But there's a lot of things that come from this, and we also heard Yext was talking about today. People don't know Yext or like another knowledge base, but could be part of this new browsing experience. But I started thinking about this idea of SEO in particular, and also the impact. So in SEO is going to be the impact on the publishers of websites, and then we have this impact on the users of websites. So first of all, from the user standpoint, it seems like a huge win. They're going to go to websites which generally the information architectures are all over the board in terms of you never really know what you're going to get. You feel like a hunter gatherer every time you hit one website. Like, what is this? Where's the thing I need? Is the thing I need? Does it even exist? Is it related? And you just waste a lot of time. This summarization feature or better on-site search, certainly would help with that as well. But the summarization feature, I think, is a really good one, so that people will be able to get in and out faster, just like answer boxes, things like that.
Yeah.
Okay, so I like that initially, and that's going to mean that people who are designing websites are going to have to design them differently because the user flow is going to be different, right? Maybe they can go immediately into sort of your lower level pages because they can get there faster and they can do it better than search. But also, there's a couple things around SEO. Like, so first of all, if I'm building a website, I'm going to have to look at how each of these browsers is summarizing my page and making sure that that's what I want. Now, frankly, that could be the downside there, because I'm hoping that these summarization features will be better than most of the marketers who like seem dead set on obscuring what their company does most of the time when you hit their websites. But in any event, they're going to have to like think about, okay, how is it summarizing? What can I do to make sure it summarizes better so that I orient the users pretty quickly? And how can I leverage it to get them to those internal pages where we're fulfilling their need faster? So that's like one, just like that in-browser direct experience once they're on the site. But then the other one is, what about SEO, right? So what am I doing on my site, which is going to be different from an SEO standpoint, because that it's not just like people are coming to my site, but then we have all this search, these different types of search. And I think a lot of people haven't thought about this idea that citations change the way you think about uh, clicking through on a search result. Because, you know, I try to explain this to people and say, hey, listen, let's say there's 3 different elements in a search, 3 different like key points. Google's like interpreting your intent if it gets it right, right? And it's going to say, geez, well, I'll give you the answer that's the best, that best fits all 3 of those. Or it's going to say, one of these seems like more of a priority. I'm going to give you the best answer. Okay. Well, the thing that you really want might not be in any of those initial links, or it might be buried, or you might not know. When you do a chat response, you actually, it breaks out those elements. Say, oh, you want to know about this? Here's the answer. And oh, by the way, they're like, it means this and this and this. And these are all important. And all of a sudden, you have a citation where you can click through to that 3rd element that might not have showed up in Google, might be page 14 on your SERP results. So if we think about web browsing, there's that one piece. And like the people who publish websites now have to think about a different on-site experience along with a different search optimization experience.
Yeah, it's going to change quite a lot. I mean, just looking at the chat when Leslie requested the Opera announcement, I'm just imagining if you have Opera there and it has access to the generative AI chatbot, or if you're using Bing and you say, "Oh, I'm looking for stories about from companies that are integrating generative AI into their browsers." It's not going to send you. It's like it'll tell you about what Opera is doing, but it won't just say, "Here's Opera's homepage." It'll say, "Oh, here's the specific." Link to that specific story, and here in this web page is where the thing you've been asking about is, and maybe show other information that's not necessarily on that page, but is within the site itself that you don't have to click around to look for. I mean, just the idea that instead of having to go to a place and then search there, but bringing the search with you essentially is going to it's going to change how people place information and how they organize all that stuff. And it's also going to mean things like landing pages are going to have to operate differently because nobody's going to be landing there anymore.
Absolutely. So what we're starting to see is that a lot of different things that we take for granted that we've been doing for a long time are about to change. And some of them are going to change in small ways and some are going to change in big ways. I mean, if you think about the Veritone thing, it might be that like you can create a new audio ad in just a couple of minutes in 10 languages, right? And, you know, if it's like a full workflow, I mean, that's like very different for anybody who's actually pushing out ads on a regular basis. It might be from a Yext standpoint that all of a sudden a company, which is basically just a knowledge base that usually Google and some other search engines hit in order to surface local business information, will be its own separate chatbot or its own central search and knowledge base that other people start to look at as an alternative. You know, if I'm doing this, and like, frankly, Yext could be the type of thing that replaces some of those other solutions that we've used, that like Yelp over the years to like find local business stuff, because this might even be better, right? We look at the change in publishing for websites. We look at AI writing. We look at how enterprises might integrate some of these capabilities internally, hiring. What this is looking like is a spark that's going to grow into something very big. Some of these things are probably going to fail, but it looks like a lot of the new applications based on the LLMs are not what people were thinking about 6 or 7 months ago. And in addition to that, some of them are going to be pretty successful because they provide value right away.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking about what you're saying of combining Yex knowledge with what Veritone can do for not just generating text, but for having voices. And suddenly, the idea that Google Duplex had, which seemed to always be on the verge of not functioning or very very limited, suddenly you could be getting a call from a Veritone's voice or from Yex voice saying, "Oh, we noticed that this is happening. Have you changed your hours, or what's going on with you guys for the
Oh,
holidays? We want to
great.
make sure your customers know, and actually have a conversation and do follow up in a way that has not been feasible at all before."
Yeah. And there's a question from Mikhail Stanislawic around ad revenue, how it'll change eyeballs on websites. I think that's obviously very important. I actually believe that people with high value long tail content, like that third point that Google might ignore, but like shows up now, surfaces, they're going to get more traffic because they're not the big news organization like Bloomberg or the huge global company that like gets primacy in all of Google's search algorithms, but they just have like they answer questions really well, sort of these nuanced questions lower down in the stack around these general queries. I think they're likely to get more. I think some people are likely to get less. I mean, when answer boxes came out, Google was really pushing this idea that, oh, if you are the primary source for the answer box, you get more. It is true. And it's better than SERP1 even, but it doesn't mean that there aren't people who don't hit your site after that. And if you're not the answer box, you're basically screwed in that category. So I think it's going to help people down the stack a little bit
I mean,
get exposed.
yeah, well, I was going to say, I mean, we're not even touching on it right now, but just speaking of ad revenue, we haven't even mentioned how the AI generated images are going to totally unravel the current model.
Absolutely. And we're not going to talk about that today because that would be another
That's all.
10 minutes. But I will answer this other question by Mikhail. I don't know the answer to this right now because Bing hasn't really integrated it fully yet. I mean, when you do the search, it gives you the answer on the side. It gives you in the sidebar and the main part of it, it gives you the 10 blue links plus the traditional ads that they're providing. When you go just into chat mode, I'm not sure how this is going to play out, but I suspect what's going to happen is it's going to be either shown up alongside or below the chat response, that there might be a helpful ad. I don't think they're going to have room initially to do 3 or 4 ads, but I think they will do at least one. And it might be in the chips that they use, the little buttons like the quick links for your sources. They might put an ad in there as well. Maybe that'll be a different color, like it'll be yellow as opposed to blue or something like that. But the Microsoft executive in charge of this product said, "Oh, in response to the press conference they had, this will have ads from the start. So just expect it to generate revenue from the beginning."
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a lot changing very, very quickly.
Yeah, Mikhail just asked this other question, which is fascinating. Maybe we handle this more in like the LinkedIn chat afterwards, and I'll put all the links to like the articles and stuff like that in this post that most of you guys found in LinkedIn. And this will also wind up being a story in Synthedia if you're subscribed to that. So, do you think that AI chatbots for search may start pushing the websites to become just knowledge databases? To me, that's like the logical outcome. And it's not that they'll have to push them, that you're going to surface more by having high value content that can answer some of these questions. It's not really different than SEO in that way. But if you don't do that from a website standpoint, I think you are going to be at increasing risk because, Matt Wilder's in here. He made a comment on one of my posts this week, and he said, "Hey, I've started using some of these other search engines." I think he mentioned U.com, maybe Perplexity directly, and said, "Oh, basically half my search is now on those and not on Google." I found very similar. I would probably say that my search is less than half on Google. Google's still better for some of these. But I absolutely, I think this is going to change. And I think behavior is going to take longer than we think to change for most people. Everyone searches. But a lot of the people, like the folks in this room that are tech savvy, that are thought leaders, that are people that are using Twitter, who are more at the vanguard of public conversations, that they're actually going to make this switch first. And that's going to drive a huge issue for Google unless they can get barred, to a point where it's as good or better than these other type of solutions.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be a big race, but I think, I don't know, I believe that will change. We all got used to the idea that anytime we have a question, we pull out our phone and type in an answer. I don't think that changing from that to just sort of an ongoing conversation with an AI will be too difficult. I think I agree it'll take time, but I do think it'll be a transition that will happen without too much fuss.
Okay, I think we're going to leave it at that today. We actually went 40 minutes. Not my goal. Try to do these a little bit shorter, but so fun to talk about these things and make sure that we cover the important things of the week. If anybody wants to refer to this or share it, this will be up on YouTube momentarily. And we'll be sharing it through other channels. If you have other questions, if you want to be on the show at some point coming up, to let me know. Definitely want to bring other voices into this conversation. I'm not positive we're going to do this next week. We'll definitely do it the week after, just looking at schedules. And I'm not sure we're going to do it on Fridays every week. We might wind up doing it on Thursdays. Might be a little bit better for some folks. But we're going to work that out going forward. Keep an eye out. I think this has been fun. We've got really good feedback around GAIN, Generative AI News Roundup. Rundown. So we hope to have you guys back. And until next time, bye-bye.
Bye.